Mm-hmm. She's just watching. All right, so this book is called Tehya's Pollution Solution. Chapter 1. I took Grandma's journal out of my backpack and flipped to the page I wanted. At the top was a paragraph written in Grandma's small, careful script. Today I found a beautiful but differently shaped tree along the Elwha River. The trunk is bent as if the tree is carrying a heavy weight. As usual, Grandma's journal entry included a sketch of the scene. Although the edges of the page were curling and the paper was a little faded and brown, the giant cedar stood out clearly. I looked from the scene in the journal to the spot on the riverbank across from me and back down to the journal. Nice drawing, Grandma, I whispered, running my finger along the outline of the tree in the sketch. Sam, I called to my best friend. I listened for a few moments. Tehya, I finally heard him call back. He sounded far away. I'm by the rocks, I yelled. I sat down and looked at the river gurgling by. The trees and animals and rivers are important to everyone who lives in this area, but they're especially important to us, the Elwha. I'm a member of the lower Elwha Clallam tribe. We've lived on this land for thousands of years, long before it was named Washington State. Even though a lot has changed since my grandma lived here, I love knowing that she grew up swimming in the same river and running in the same fields that I do. Sometimes looking at her journal makes me miss her even more, but it always makes me feel closer to her spirit. I heard footsteps and Sam appeared. He scrambled down the rocks to join me on the riverbank. Take a look at the sketch, I said. He squinted his eyes against the sun and peered at the journal. Okay, now look across the river, I said. What do you think? Sam looked up at the giant cedar jutting out of the bank across from us, and he looked back at the picture. The riverbank looks a little different, but this must be the place, Sam said. You can tell by that funny bend in the tree, and by the boulder on the left. That's what I thought, I said. I'm glad we found it. I was afraid the tree had been cut down. It had to have been at least 50 years ago when Grandma drew this in her journal. How many more photos do you need to take before you've matched all her drawings? Just 2 more, I said. Mama had given me Grandma's journal a few months ago. Okay. So Tehya's got a journal from her mom, or from her grandmother, okay? And it helps her to feel closer. I don't know why this is. I'm gonna make it bigger. Oh well, hopefully y'all can see that okay. And it makes her feel closer to her grandma. Why do you think it makes her feel closer to her grandma?
Because exactly what she did.
Do you think she can go and talk to her grandma?
No.
Why?
Because she talked to them.
Okay. Yeah, good. So y'all picked up on that. You're inferencing. All right. So her mother had given her grandma's journal to her a few months ago. We left it outside for 3 days and 3 nights to honor her spirit before I could use it. After I read what she had written, I decided to start keeping my own journal. I'm not as good at drawing as she was, but I am good at taking photos. At first, my goal was to find all the places Grandma had sketched and take a picture of each one for my journal. Then I started adding more photos and letters to Grandma, telling her about my life. I try to practice writing the Clallam language in my journal too, by labeling things I take pictures of. Some of the spots I've taken pictures of look almost exactly the same as her sketches. Some are almost completely different. A lot can happen in 50 years. I'm going to take a couple of pictures here, but I'll come meet you by the blackberry bushes in a few minutes, I said. I settled on a rock to take the picture and wondered if Grandma sat at this very spot to sketch the tree so many years before. I turned the camera lens to make the focus clearer. The clearer the tree became, the more the river sparkled. Flecks of red, yellow, and blue light seemed to be skipping and dancing on the surface. I've never seen the water look like this, I thought. As I snapped the picture, I heard a shriek above me. I stood and I raised my head just in time to see an eagle, swooping and swirling over an area downriver. I ran along the bank, keeping my eyes on the eagle. In a swift movement, he dove toward the water, and I raised my camera and clicked. Got it. The screen on my camera showed I'd captured the giant bird catching a salmon, and scooping it out of the water. I watched breathlessly as the eagle flew deeper into the forest. I turned and headed back to Grandma's spot. The flashes of color sparkling off the river caught my eye again. Hopping from one rock to another, I made my way closer to the edge of a riverbank. I paused on an especially tall rock and refocused my camera to get a clear shot of the river. Then, with sudden understanding, I froze. A slick, glossy rainbow shimmered on the water. Have any of you ever seen a bald eagle before? They're pretty rare to see, but you can see them around here sometimes. My husband fishes a lot on Bear Creek, and he's seen a couple out there while he's been fishing. It's a pretty cool sight to see. So she saw the eagle, and now she saw a slick, glossy rainbow shimmering in the water. What do you think that is? You ever seen something like that, kind of shimmery in the water? You know, it's probably not supposed to be there. This wasn't beautiful dancing water, it was oil, and it was everywhere. Sam, I shouted, Sam, come quick. Did you get the picture? Sam's voice trailed off as he stood beside. His eyes widened as he noticed the oil. What happened? I don't know, I said, but we need to tell someone and get help. Okay. Chapter 2, April 6th. So this is a journal entry, and she's writing to her grandmother. Dear Grandma, suddenly life feels like a movie running on fast forward. So much has happened since Sam and I ran home and told Mama about the oil spill. My heart was doing flip-flops when we told Mama. I knew the look on her face. She was so upset. She called the tribal council, and they're starting to make more calls. They say the oil is coming from a tank that burst at the site where they were removing the dam upstream. What's going to happen to all the animals that live in the river, like the salmon and the insects and the otters? And what about the eagle I saw and the other birds that eat fish? They're going to be in trouble, aren't they? I wish I could just scoop up all the oil and take it away. Sam was trying to make me feel better. He said we'd probably discover the oil spill before it could do too much harm, but I'm not so sure. Here's her little journal entry where she's written to her grandmother. And in the book, it doesn't have it right here, but in the book she's written like what it is and also written it out in the Cleveland language, the tribal language. So she's worried, she's starting to worry and notice, okay, the oil's not supposed to be there. It's probably going to start to affect some of the animals and plants that are in that area. Chapter 3, the cleanup begins. Sam, I announced as he opened his front door, I can't stand just hanging around not doing anything. I'm going to the river. Do you want to come with me? Sam paused. I don't know, Tehya. I mean, what if we're just in the way? At least we have to see if we can help, I said. Think about the birds and trees and plants by the river. And the young salmon and the salmon fry. If they don't make it downstream because of the oil in the water, they won't grow into adult salmon. The salmon fry are the baby salmon. You're right, Sam said. Let's go. Everything looks so different, I said, as we approached the riverbank. The other day it had been so quiet. I could hear the babble of the water rushing over the rocks and the shriek of the eagle. Now that peaceful spot was a chattering center of activity. All I could hear were voices, worried voices. Groups of people were scattered all along the edge of the river, huddled in clusters just like the plants that sprout along the riverbank. Our tribal council was there and some concerned elders and the tribe's river restoration team. There were lots more people that I didn't recognize. Everyone was kind of official, Sam said. I'm sure they can use help though, right? I asked, suddenly less certain than I'd been at home. Oh, I said, there's Thomas. See him? Of course he's here. Come on. If anyone could help clean up this mess, it was my neighbor Thomas. He's an environmental engineer. He graduated college last year and returned home to the reservation. He once explained to me that in his work, he uses math, science, and creativity to help solve problems in the environment. Now I waved to him, and he waved back at Sam and me. He held a map of the Elwha River, which snaked across the page in blue. There were red circles and X's drawn on the map. Hi, Thomas, I said. We want to help. Is there anything we can do? Hi, Tehya. Hi, Sam, Thomas said. It's great that you came. Lots of volunteers have gathered to help. We're beginning to put together our plan of action. What's the plan? Sam asked. Good question. We still need to work out the specific process for this cleanup, Thomas explained. We need to use a special technology to clean up the oil. Like a laser or something, I asked. Thomas smiled. Not quite, he said. A technology is anything designed designed to solve a problem. Remember when we learned that?
Yep.
In this case, the technology for cleaning up the oil is a process, a series of steps to help us remove as much oil as possible. One of the most important things to do when there's been an oil spill is to contain it, so that oil can't spread and pollute more areas. Then we need to start removing the oil. Do you use big shovels to get it out? I asked. Sometimes we do use shovels or scoops to remove the oil, Thomas said. Sometimes we use different materials to absorb the oil. Other times we use special chemicals to disperse the oil, to break it up. We have to think carefully about the best way to protect the ecosystem where the oil has been spilled. We've learned a lot about ecosystems in school, Sam said. Every area has its own ecosystem, its own community of animals, plants, fungi, and bacteria. And the environment that they live in is part of the ecosystem too, I added. That's exactly right, Thomas said. We have to be careful not to cause any more harm to the ecosystem. How could we cause more harm than spilling oil? Sam asked. You're right. The main problem is the oil spilled in the first place, Thomas said. But now that it's there, we don't want to make it any worse. So, for example, if we accidentally push the oil around, we might end up moving it into areas that were clean. That wouldn't be good. My mind flashed to the flecks of oil dancing on the water. The oil had seemed to stretch as far as I could see. Well, how do you contain the oil when there's so much of it, I asked. Booms can help us, Thomas said. Booms? Sam asked, like with explosions. It's a different kind of boom, Thomas explained. These booms are sort of like floating fences that help us corral the oil. Containing it can be tough, especially if there are strong currents in the water. Currents in the water, I thought. Like here, I asked, pointing to a section of the river on the map. I noticed the other day when I was taking pictures that the currents are very strong here. It's almost like a whirlpool, Sam said, nodding. Here, I'll show you, I said. I pulled my journal out of my backpack and flipped to the pictures I've taken in the area. See, the water is choppy here, I said, pointing to the photo. It's because some beavers are building a dam nearby. It's changing the way the river flows. That's good to know, Thomas said. He took a red pen out of his pocket and circled the area. I remember some things about the river from when I was a kid, but lots of things have changed in just the few years I've been away. Do you have any pictures of other parts of the river? Thomas asked. Oh, sure, I said. I take pictures of the trees, the water, the animals, all sorts of things, I said. We can come down to the river almost every day in the summer. This is great, Thomas said. Your pictures and everything you know about the river could be very helpful to us. Really? I asked. How? Well, we need to decide how to use the resources we have and which areas of the river should be cleaned up first, Thomas explained. To do that, we have to ask good questions about the area. It's all part of the process, the engineering design process. You guys should know that well, right? Okay, so Thomas is an engineer, but he's trying to develop a plan on how to contain the oil and also clean up the oil, because what he doesn't want to do is cause more harm, okay? So how could they cause more harm to the ecosystem if they just go in there without a plan? They could spread it, right? Yeah, so they want to first contain it, and then they want to develop a plan to clean it up. So, and you guys will actually be doing a simulation of this in a lab coming up in a couple weeks. So you kind of have to do that. You have to develop a plan for how to contain it and then also clean it up. All right, so now they're looking at the engineering design process and how they can come up with this plan. It's a way of thinking that helps engineers solve problems, Thomas explained. The first step is asking good questions. Well, what kinds of questions, I asked. Questions about what worked well to clean up other oil spills and what didn't work as well, Thomas explained. Questions about the local ecosystem and how that ecosystem might be affected. So how do you get the answers, Sam asked. Sometimes you might not get all the answers at first, Thomas said. Doing research, observing the ecosystem, and talking to local experts like you and Tehya can help too. Well, what do you do next, I asked. The next step is to imagine some ways to solve the problem and then plan out what you'll do. When you put your plan into action, you test and evaluate as you go. Then you make improvements based on what you see. You have to go through all those steps before the river is cleaned up, Sam asked. We have to go through all these steps and probably more, Thomas sighed. We often have to try a few different things before the cleanup is successful. That's the improved step I talked about. We're already already working on containing the oil and beginning to remove it, but it will be a long process. So they're trying to work through it. Do you think they're gonna get it right the very first time that they do it? No, probably not. Kind of like yesterday with our catapults. Okay, you had to go back, you had to improve, and then you had to try it again. So it's the same thing with them trying to clean up this oil spill. Chapter 4, this is another journal entry to her grandmother. Dear Grandma, I'm almost too tired to write. Everyone has been working hard to clean up the oil spill. Did you ever see anything like this when you lived here? There's so much oil. Not only that, there are also animals like ducks. I was getting ahead of myself. Ducks and muskrats that need to be cleaned because they have oil on their fur and feathers. Have you guys ever seen pictures of that? I think Dawn has a commercial where they're like cleaning the ducks with the Dawn dish soap. Thomas's friends showed Sam and me how to make the soapy solution they used to clean animals. They set up a big white tent by the edge of the river, and that's where they bring animals that have been coated with oil. Sam and I have been helping there a lot. I really wish I could help clean the oil out of the river, but Thomas said it can be dangerous, and that cleaning the animals is the best way for us to help. Yesterday morning, Thomas came to find us in the tent. He wanted us to show some of his co-workers different animal habitats we knew along the river. We took them to the log jam in the river where the salmon fry live and grow. Then we showed them the spot where we had seen the family of beavers gnawing on trees and building their new dam. We even showed them some of my photographs, like the one of the eagle taking the fish out of the water, and the one showing the clusters of cattails growing in the marsh. I couldn't believe how interested the environmental engineers were in everything we knew. I'm so happy your sketches inspired me to take all these pictures. I think they've been really helpful. I haven't had much time to search for the places in the last 2 sketches that I'm missing to complete my photo journal, but I've taken some pictures of the work being done by the river to remove the oil and clean the animals. I hope sometime soon I'll be able to take pictures of some animals when they are back in the river where they belong. So when that eagle swooped down to get the fish, what if that water was contaminated with oil?
Because they get it on them.
That means the fish was probably contaminated, right? And when the eagle eats the fish, what's going to happen? The eagle will be poisoned or contaminated, okay? And so it's just a vicious kind of cycle for this ecosystem when something like that happens. All right, so we're going to stop there with that. The next thing we're going to do is, in the story, she talks about how she has her grandmother's journal, and her grandmother was an artist, and so she sketched what the riverbank looked like 50 years ago. And then Tehya, is a photographer, so she took pictures of what it looks like now. So I'm going to give each table a picture of what the riverbank might have looked like 50 years ago, and then today, and then I want you to kind of lay them side by side and see what differences you can spot. So it's kind of like, yeah, find the difference. But don't write on these, because I'm going to take them back up so that I can use them for second class. Okay? So when you get both, you can go ahead and start comparing. Yeah, I'm just going to get one per table, so you can kind of, if you've got a partner beside you, y'all can just look on together. Put your mask on. You got it?
How much did you find, Mickey? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got 8,
I didn't realize that. Well, yeah, that's what I count.
Alright, so let's look for this first question. Let's look at both pictures. Okay, what are the parts of the ecosystem that you see? What do you see in the picture? Trees, birds, what else? Deer, okay, bugs. What's in the water? Fish. You've got land, you've got water. When we build our ecosystems that we have to take care of, it's going to have two parts. It's called an eco-column. It'll have a land portion on the top and it'll have water on the bottom. And we connect them because the land and the water works together to keep everything in the ecosystem alive. Okay? Alright, so, okay, so in the picture, what do you think the birds eat?
The
Fish, okay, the fish and the bugs, right, the insects. Okay, what do you think the deer eat? They eat plants. They're, what do you call that, omnivores, right? Herbivores. Okay, so let's look at differences. Alright, so what are some of the differences that stand out to you immediately, Garrett?
Instead of like bluebird, there's one mosquitoes and 2 butterflies.
Okay, so in picture 1, there's what?
A bird.
Alright, so 50 years ago, you see some birds sitting on the limbs, but today's picture, not as many birds, right? Okay, you notice anything else?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
There's one less big fish and about half the small fish are gone.
Okay.
There's
So in picture 2, what do you see more of?
fish, ladybugs,
And there's more bugs. Okay, so more fish and more bugs in picture 2, which is today, but less birds in picture 1. Okay, so let's think about that. What do birds eat? Fish and bugs.
That's why they're not as
Ah, you made that connection, right? Okay, so if there's less birds to eat the fish and the insects, what's going to happen? There's going to be more of them, okay? But why would there be fewer birds than there were 50 years ago?
Because people, the oil, catch them, they
eat them.
We shoot them.
Well, some people do, yeah.
We eat them in
But it could be maybe something has polluted their ecosystem or their habitat where they live, so there's fewer of them, okay? But yeah, if something dies out in an ecosystem, then whatever that eats is going to be multiplied, okay? Which is not necessarily a good thing because you can get overrun. Do we all want to be overrun with insects? Not so much, okay? So everything has to be balanced. If one thing is thrown off like that, then it can cause problems everywhere.
Or the fish ate the bird ate the fish and then it died, and that's why it's not in the. Or just not a good old age.
Could be. We don't know. We're not sure what happened. It doesn't tell us. But we know that if the birds die out, then there are going to be more insects and more fish. Oh, okay. I didn't notice that.
More ants. And more beetles.
All right. Go ahead and put your name at the top of this. Oh,